Messianics podcast, a podcast about all things Messianic Judaism. Each episode, we will be sharing our opinions as we tackle some of the biggest issues in Messianic Judaism. Now, here's your hosts, Rabbis Eric, David, Jonathan, and Toby.
Shalom and welcome to Messianics. This week we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to our hearts, and I hope it'll be near and dear to yours. Our congregations, both Brit Am and Maim Chaim, are part of two organizations, the IAMCS, or the International Alliance of Messianic Congregations and Synagogues, and the UMJC, the Union of Messianic Jewish Congregations. And the reason for that, in my estimation, is that I can like baseball and football at the same time, that there are good things in both organizations that strengthen me, that I enjoy, that fellowship connections and such, that's of value to me. But we're not going in that direction as much as the idea of unity and what we as a Messianic movement can do within the scope of unity to help one another. To give an example of what I'm talking about, all of us that use social media regularly see posts from Messianic congregations that we know are balanced. They teach truth. We know their leaders. We know what their statement of faith is, what they're in agreement with. And yet, for some reason, we don't push the share button to help spread the word of Messianic Judaism. That doesn't cost us a penny to hit the button that says share this and share it on our social media, or a teaching by a rabbi that we know. Matter of fact, I was just talking with a rabbi friend of mine from San Diego yesterday on text message, and it doesn't matter when yesterday was as far as this podcast, but I had texted him and said, hey, I was listening to your teaching this last few weeks in a series you're doing. It was really good. And we had a conversation about that. But then I thought, well, if I thought the message was solid and good, why didn't I hit the share button on it so that other people could do it? So I'm as guilty in some ways of this as other people are. But when you hear, for instance, a Messianic artist who sings a new song, to share that from YouTube or from whichever social media you're on with other people, it doesn't cost anything, but it does spread the message of Messiah. It does enhance and strengthen the Messianic movement, and it is a blessing to someone that we want to bless. And so I was sitting here thinking about all these things and what we could do for each other that wouldn't necessarily cost anything, but would encourage and strengthen one another. One such idea came up in a conversation just recently among leaders. Someone said, I have a reasonably new Messianic worship leader in my synagogue, a new worship leader. Is there a mechanism to connect Messianic worship leaders together so that they could encourage one another, share with one another, maybe shared techniques or technology or songs or whatever? And I know that Greg Silverman has a website that has a lot of Messianic music on it, and we'll post that in the link on the end of this video. But that is there for Messianic leaders to connect with, to get songs and chords and things. And I know there are others out there, but unfortunately a lot of people don't know that's available. And that's the kind of thing that we should be sharing with each other. If you read a good book by a Messianic author that you think was helpful and meaningful, you should share it on your social media, share it with your congregation, share it in whatever way you can, because when the water rises, all the ships go up. And we should work together in this way. And I'm not talking about sharing crazy stuff, but I'm talking about sharing between congregations and rabbis that we know and have a relationship with through the organizations that we're a part of. We should be sharing links. We should be sharing, for instance, we're having a worship leader come in to do service this coming Shabbat, and we've shared that on social media. Well, other rabbis and congregants and people within the Messianic movement should be sharing that on their media. Rabbi Carlson in Newport News recently had a worship team come in, and I immediately, when I saw it, hit the share button and posted, if you're in Virginia, check this out. Things that we can do that help with sharing new liturgy or new songs to go along with liturgy. What are they called? Melodies to go along with liturgy. Sharing new songs, sharing new books, sharing teachings, or things on different subjects that we need to know, that certain people are better at, archaeology and so on. I love Rabbi Jeff Seif has a book entitled "To the Ends of the Earth" that traces the early Messianic movement as it goes to the east, rather than just going to the west and to the United States. But things like that those that are trying to learn, those that are trying to study, can learn and enhance one another and strengthen one another in doing so. And so in this episode, we're going to discuss not only things that are already available, like Greg Silverman's website, but also things that we'd like to see either become available or become a habit among Messianic believers to enhance the entirety of Messianic Judaism.
And we're going to have it in the show notes, as Rabbi Eric said, but Greg Silverman's site that Rabbi Eric's referencing is shalomsongs.com, SHALOMSONGS.com, and it's an effort sort of like what Meilchad did on their website when Meilchad was up with a kind of a file of Messianic music written by Messianic artists, liturgy pieces, choral pieces, etc. That if you're a Messianic worship leader, you can go to and glean from, or if you've written stuff, submit to, and so on. A phenomenal resource there. And the reality is, and I think this is the most important part of this conversation, is I think, and we see it a lot in local congregations, right? You'll see if you've got multiple congregations in a same generalized area, sometimes there's this almost it's really a human thing, but there's almost this drive of competition, right? Like I've got to protect mine, I've got to develop mine, I've got to whatever, and there are maybe things where that's beneficial, and I can see where that comes in hand. But the reality is when we're talking, especially in the context of Messianic Judaism, the body of Messiah, it should be kingdom first more than anything else. And yes, CMC does things a particular way. You mentioned you can be a fan of baseball and football at the same time, and now things have shifted a little bit. I'm a big baseball fan, and things have shifted a little bit. But you go back 5-10 years ago, and you would watch National League games and you'd watch American League games, right? Both MLB, two different entities within the MLB, but you had different rules that were operated, right? So in the American League, you had designated hitters. The pitchers didn't hit. And the National League, your pitchers hit. And so if ever the two met, you'd have games, interleague games, where you'd have National League playing American League, and depending on whose field it was you were playing in was whose league's rules you went by. And so American League pitchers would sometimes have to bat, and it was fun because you're like, oh, they are not good at that. No wonder they stay on the mound and that's it. But you could watch both of them get a baseball experience, have a great time, even though they had slightly different ways that they did things. But ultimately, they supported the MLB, right? They worked together to see the MLB success, and so on and so forth. And in Messianic Judaism, there's different organizations, and they do things a little bit different, and congregations within those organizations may do things a little bit different. But the ultimate reality is we're all part of the same kingdom, right? And I think it's important that we figure out ways to work together in unity rather than working contrary to each other, or an us versus them, or a competitive attitude. And there are some really neat things that are happening right now in the movement that I think could be very beneficial in the long run for bringing the various Messianic Jewish congregational rabbinical organizations together in unity, not making one hegemonious thing.
Right. You don't want a pizza place to become a steakhouse.
Exactly. But to support each other, to help each other out, to work towards a unified goal for the kingdom. And one of those things, in my opinion, and we've talked about it some in how important it is, but I think education is a really important avenue. Like, to be able to raise our children to know what Messianic Jewish life is, why we do what we do, these are phenomenal. And in local congregations, there's often efforts to build those programs and so on. But there's actually a phenomenal opportunity out there right now called the S3E24 School. And S3E24 School, it's technically a UMJC program or UMJC sponsored program, but it is a Jewish education, Messianic Jewish education program for Messianic Jewish families to participate in. They have classes in both semesters of the year, and so on and so forth. There's learning to read and write Hebrew. There's learning Jewish history. There's learning gospel history, biblical history, etc. They have bar and bat mitzvah training and stuff like that. And then they have post-bar and bat mitzvah classes called Darash classes that go even deeper into theology and Hebrew. Like my son's in a class right now with Darash where they're learning cantillation and how to chant the Parsha and liturgy and Hebrew with that and so on. Rabbi Toby, his son, is in one of the younger classes for S3E24 and is learning and developing Hebrew and skills and such there. This is a phenomenal program that all Messianic Jewish organizations, the congregations and ministries represented within, could take huge benefit from and develop, and our children grow up having a cohesive understanding of Messianic Jewish history and life and practice and how to read Hebrew and so on and so forth. And then on the kind of other end of the education discussion is there are quite a few really well organized Messianic Jewish not really seminaries, but colleges and seminaries that have Messianic Jewish studies programs. Like you have, I went to Nyack College when it still existed, and I was the only student to matriculate through the Messianic Jewish studies program that was there. And so I graduated with my undergrad from there with a concentration of Messianic Jewish studies. But then you had the Feinberg Center with Chosen People Ministries and Talbot Seminary that is based in New York, and they've got a phenomenal program. You have TKU, the King's University, based in the Dallas area, the DFW area, South Lake, Texas, that has a phenomenal Messianic Jewish studies program. St. Petersburg Seminary in Florida with Netzer David Yeshiva has a Messianic Jewish studies program there. The Messianic Jewish Theological Institute, Denver Seminary, I believe, has a Messianic Jewish Studies program of some sort. Greg Silverman, Dr. Greg Silverman, is connected with a school in California that has a Messianic Jewish, I think, worship ministry type of program going. And there's a few others scattered around.
And speaking of Greg, he also has a program to teach worship, like to come to your synagogue, watch your worship team, give kind of advice and stuff. His doctorate degree is in choral worship and music. And he also comes and helps, or does by Zoom, helps establish choirs or singing group or choruses or whatever to strengthen, to help, to lead, to guide people in that direction, which is a great tool to have for your congregation, to have somebody who's outside of your congregation kind of look at what's happening and be able to give constructive criticism and help and support and encouragement as an outsider viewing what's going on. Also, I don't know if you mentioned Aisha Ruah, the new or the
being
program
revived,
that's just being revived in the MJAA, which is a group for people who are young people who feel called to worship ministry or pastoral ministry. And
I think Aisha Ruah is, if I remember correctly, a partnership between the IMCS, the YMJA, and the Young Professionals, the Messianic Jewish Young Professionals group. It's
and an exceptional program to encourage people called to ministry to step up and do that. And again, that's open to young people.
And it's early rendition, and it's been it was not operating for a few years now, and it's coming back in 2025. And I'm not sure exactly how it's. I know Rabbi Jonathan Bernis is the primary instructor at it this year, and it's a weekend long program. But Rabbi Toby and his wife Brooke and myself and my wife Danielle went to several years of the Aisha Ruach Leadership Summit in its early days, which was probably late 2000s, early 2010s, I think, somewhere around there, maybe a little later than that. And that's actually, it was at Eisha Ruach that Rabbi Toby and Brooke and Danielle and I met for the first time in person, and that kind of launched where we are now and what we're doing. But Eisha Ruach is a phenomenal opportunity.
Also, you mentioned it, the Young Professionals Program within the MJAA, YMJA connective there for young professionals to get together, and they're becoming very active using social media, Zoom, and other things to encourage young people who are young professionals, college and career. They're getting exposed to each other in a unique way to support each other, stand with each other, and be with each other. So that's another really good way to unify people from different congregations and communities together with the purpose of strengthening and encouraging one another. Another thing that I was really excited about is the cantoral program that Aaron Alsbrook is doing, which he's going to be doing a Zoom cantoral program for those who want to learn how to not only cant the liturgy, but also lean the Torah, to read the Torah, to be able to use the cantillation, the trope, to sing the Torah at your synagogue. And he's doing a class that's open, as far as I know, to everybody who would like to participate in that to strengthen the entire movement. And so these things that we have that are there to strengthen the entire movement, I think, are very positive in how we do things and encouraging unity in the movement without uniformity. We're not saying that each congregation needs to be the same or have the same structure, or we use the MLB, or you did a little bit ago. If you go to a Major League Baseball website, they all look the same.
Yeah.
They're standard. We're not talking about standardizing in that way, but we are talking about using the tools that we have to strengthen the whole while we have our unique differences.
And ultimately, unity should be one of the primary leading factors. I mean, maybe one day we'll do an episode on this, that there are red lines that have to be drawn. You know, there are things, there are lines you can't step over just for the sake of unity, right? But generally speaking, for the most part, the things that we tend to be divided over in general in the body of Messiah are not things that should break unity. We may do things a little bit different, but like, again, being a baseball fan, Banana League or Banana Baseball, whatever, Banana Ball, whatever it's called, the Savannah Bananas, their whole rules, like it's drastically different than anything you'd see in the MLB, but it's no less baseball. It's still baseball. It's still fun to watch. They do things a little different and what have you. And honestly, within Messianic Judaism, in any of the congregational organizations, you have experiences like that already, right? We have congregations from virtually all of the Messianic Jewish organizations, congregational organizations. We have congregations that are way more Orthodox presenting. You have congregations that are way more conservative presenting, and you have congregations that are way more church presenting. That, you know, I like to jokingly say that they're like a church with some Hebrew flair, some Jewish flair, and all of that is acceptable. All of that has a place within Messianic Judaism, and that's fine. But we shouldn't be working against each other. We should be working to support and uplift each other. And I think
in all the ways that we can. And there's so many of these that we can do that will be helpful to one another.
I think one of the things that would be an easy addition to promoting the idea of unity is, one, everyone should be clear which one or ones they belong to. Mm-hmm. So you go to the website, it should clearly say we're affiliated with the IMCS, UMJC,
whichever, whatever.
Yeah, whichever one.
Yeah.
But as a gesture of good faith, I think it is also would be a good idea to, one, have a page of, the other organizations we are
in a relationship with. Yeah,
in a relationship with. Even if you're not a paying dues member, so if you belong to the IMCS, even if you are not a part of the union, to say we're other groups we're also friends with, Tikkun, UMJC, because at the end of the day they should be our friends. The other thing that I think would be more practical, most of the Messianic groups have some sort of Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever on their website that show you where their congregations are. And a lot of times when people come to a Messianic website, well, one, they want to know where you are. But two, if you can show them, especially if they look and they're like, oh man, these people are a couple hours away. I don't know if I can, commit to that kind of travel. But then you provide them with, a link to one of these maps, and they can see, oh, there's a congregation actually in town. I don't have to drive 2 hours. I can drive 10 minutes, But if you were to post the links to not only, so let's say you're in the IMCS, you post the map from the IMCS website, but also the union website, because at the end of the day, people who are looking for a congregation, they could fit in both, or they could be undecided. They may show up to yours and be like,
it's not really my cup of tea.
Not really my cup of tea. I really don't feel like I can connect with God here. And they go to the next one, whether it be Tikkun or Union, and be like, nope, this is better. I'd love to come to some of your things sometime. I appreciated your High Holy Day services a lot, but I'd really like this to be my weekly place of worship.
So we do in the Gulf Coast, we try to do a couple of times a year some stuff together with the various Messianic congregations along the Gulf Coast, but I was actually out in San Diego recently. Well, both Rabbi Eric and I were recently for a conference, and I was talking with Rabbi Barney Kasdan, who leads Keilat Ariel in San Diego, and with Rabbi Joel Lieberman, who leads
Tree of Life in San Diego. Both are Messianic Jewish congregations. They're part of the different organizations. Tree of Life is part of the IMCS, and Keilat Ariel is part of the UMJC. But one of the things that I thought was really impressive was that they have an intentionality of relationship. Mm-hmm. They're in the same city. They're about 20 minutes apart. They're in the same city. They have an intentionality of relationship.
Right.
They were telling me that they get together, their congregations get together at least once a year for a picnic, for a picnic and fellowship together. They might do concerts together, that kind of stuff. And that they actually will refer people to each other's congregation. So if somebody comes to one of the congregations and go, this is a little too much of this for me, and I would rather like, oh, well, you might find this to be a better home, go visit over there, and vice versa. And they send each other back and forth. I know that this is something that we do at CMC. I think you guys do as well, is when people in our congregation are traveling, right? They'll go, hey, I'm going to be in whatever state and whatever city on such and such a date coming up. Could you recommend a congregation in the area for me? And so I'll go on the IMCS website and I'll look to see what may be close to that area. I'll go to the UMJC website. I'll go to Tikkun's website and look to see what congregations will be close to that area.
Right.
And then I'll go, okay, hey, I recommend this one or I recommend that one or whatever. And likewise, if I don't see one at all, I'll just do a quick Google search, Messianic Jewish congregations near whatever city, and I will, if it comes up with a list of them, I'll go through each one's website and see, okay, this one's a little off-putting, you don't want to go there. Okay, this is one that I could recommend that, and I'll watch some of their services or whatever, and I'll find them somewhere to go that I can feel comfortable with them attending. It doesn't necessarily have to be
recommending
part of my organizations that I'm a part of, right? Or maybe it's a part of it, but as long as I can honestly say I can be comfortable with you going here, right? Because again, it's not about our unique congregations. It's not about our whatever, our ministries. It's about the kingdom and being able to have that network of unity together is important and valuable.
And I agree with everything. I don't think we can really. I think you also have to address the obstacles to unity if you want that. I mean, if you want unity, you have to have obstacles to it. The first thing you have to understand is, and this is important, you can't have unity if there are people in the circle of people that you want unity with that don't want that.
Right. They're actively working
I want unity with you, Jonathan. Well, I don't want that, Toby. Well, no, I want it, Jonathan. Please. You're coming with me.
Right. Takes two to tango, as they say.
Oh, of course it does. Okay, so my son is in a Shreno, and I'm a champion for a Shreno, and I love that.
Right.
You have to think about nuances for things like a Shreno, though, or for Rabbi Alsbrook's thing. The nuances are, I like the picnic because nobody's benefiting from that but the kingdom of God. In a Shreno, they're making money.
Yep.
So if I want to make money, well, I'm going to open it up to everybody because I want to make money. That doesn't necessarily mean that I want everybody showing up, but I got to make money. So do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So you have to...
There's some balance that has to
There's balance, but there's nuance. When I look at somebody who says, well, if I wasn't giving you $500 every 6 months or whatever, I don't know if you'd really want me.
Right.
I'm not saying that's the case with the training. I'm not saying that's the case with a trainer or anything else, because I know those people. What I'm saying, though, is that, if I'm starting something, and let's just say I'm a Jewish guy and I'm starting a yeshiva and I don't want Gentiles there, I think anybody would probably say, hey, dude, the numbers say if you want to make money with this, you better open it up to them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I might not necessarily want them there. So what I like about the picnic is, hey, everybody come. Why? Because we want you there.
Right. And that's one of the things we do, as Rabbi David mentioned, a couple times a year we try to do a unity service at one of our congregations. And one of the things we started to do when we did that was we don't take an offering for the host congregation.
Right.
So nobody, it's just people getting together to worship together and fellowship together. But it's not where, I'm not going there because I have to give, or I'm going to go there and I'm going to get something.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be the fly in the ointment in the discussion.
No.
I'm saying this too.
Yeah.
We've talked about a particular unnamed congregation that turns Gentiles away and refers them to churches. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. You can go there, and they will know, well, Eric's fine with Gentiles, we're not, but Eric's Jewish. Eric's part of the team. We can be unified with Eric. But what am I supposed to do with that? No, we're going to be unified, right, from the church down the street, but hey, let's be unified. So there are some obstacles.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Because turning someone away from your place of worship is not the kingdom.
Well, it's like
of God.
most of the
God.
major donation groups to Israel that operate through the evangelical sphere. All of them have that word unity in their little thing. But then if you want to show up to an event and pray a certain way or talk a certain way or give a certain message, well, you can't do that here. It's like, so we're not unified then.
Right.
We can't exist in unity because you only want one side of the picture and maybe a tickle of the other side, and primarily from the other side, what you want is money. So
and money talks. There's a reason why they say that.
It's interesting that the largest humanitarian aid group to Israel is a group that primarily fundraises from people who believe in Yeshua or Jesus, but are fundamentally against that belief. I mean, millions and millions of dollars are given to the International Association of Christians,
Fellowship of Christians
and Jews.
Yeah.
But they are, while they advertise to Christians and they play Christian music or even Paul Wilbur music,
and they know the lingo,
and they know the words to speak to encourage Christians to give to bless Jews in Israel, they are fundamentally anti-faith in Yeshua, completely to the point of where it's anathema to them, but they take the money. And I don't want the Messianic movement as a whole to ever get that kind of a reputation, and we border on it at times, that it's okay for a non-Jewish person to be around as long as they're giving and doing, but they're not us.
Yeah,
and that's wrong.
And I'm simply making not the argument. I'm simply making the claim. You can't unify with that. I can't unify with a guy who says Gentiles shouldn't be in Messianic synagogues. I can't unify with that. I can't reconcile that. That makes me feel like garbage. Now, a Jewish guy who you might hate that, but he'd be somebody like that would be more welcoming to you. Be like, yeah, we get that you get that way, but But me, no. It's just like, or somebody, a Messianic Jewish guy. I'm just saying an example, because I know these people are real. That believe that you don't have to evangelize to Jewish people, that they don't need Yeshua. How can I? Paul would flip his lid. Okay, and now we're getting into something that I was thinking about just the other day. Paul would flip his lid at that dude. Are you serious? They don't need the Messiah? So Paul said that he would give his salvation up if they accepted Yeshua. Instead, if that was true, Paul would say, they don't really need it, guys. Yeah. Instead of saying, I would give up my salvation.
And this goes back to what Rabbi David was saying. Toby, you're making great points. This goes back to what Rabbi David was saying earlier about unity without without conflicting with absolutes. For instance,
or at the expense of the gospel.
At the expense of the gospel. For instance, the Scripture clearly teaches the one new man of Jew and non-Jew, one in Messiah. So if there are congregations that claim to be Messianic that don't believe that Jew and non-Jew are one in Messiah, then we should not be in unity with them. No. But those that do, we should be able to support one another. Those that don't believe in the deity of Yeshua, we can't be in fellowship with them. But as long as they profess to believe in the deity of Yeshua and that Yeshua is God and not just a created being of God, then we should be in unity. So there are absolutes that we should hold the line on and say. So when we're talking about unity, we're not talking about unity at the expense of compromise of biblical truth. We're talking about if you're part of the union and you're part of the MJAA, according to the documents of those organizations, you believe in Jew and non-Jew, one in Messiah. If somebody is in one of those organizations, they don't believe that Jews and non-Jews both need to be saved through the blood atonement of Yeshua through what he did, then they shouldn't be in that organization.
Yeah, I think it's
and that's one of the reasons that being a part of these organizations are important, because there is a statement of faith that says this is what we hold.
Yeah, I don't have an issue platforming someone who I disagree with on, let's just say, egalitarian versus complementarianism with marriage or things like that, the role of women. I mean, there are some things that. But I can't platform a dude who doesn't like Gentiles.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
Yeah, there's lines that that separate unity.
Okay, so and here is why I think I don't necessarily have the solution, and I don't understand. It's like, oh, you don't have a solution. Why are you talking about it? I'm telling you to understand this: that when the Bible was written, I think that if Peter and Paul and John and Matthew were transported with a time machine to today, I don't think they would know what to do, because there's Bibles in stores. These men were dying for what they were saying. They were dying. Romans and Gentiles were after them for saying that stuff, and their own people were. And you see, the reason why John and James and Paul could sit down and ultimately agree to disagree was because they were all, and the reason why they could find unity is because they were dying. Yeah. They didn't know if they were going to see each other again over this gospel. You see, we can sit here and say this now, and we're going to send this on a platform, and we're going to live tomorrow. And I think the reason why is, I'm not saying, oh, we need persecution, but it's the only thing I've ever seen ironclad works every time to bring people together. The IMCS and the UMJC and Tikkun and all these organizations, we would tighten up real bad if they started lining us up and killing us over the gospel.
Yeah, it's amazing just to give a glimpse of that when, and now this has been 20 years ago more, but when 9/11 happened,
this is a perfect example.
All of a sudden, everybody was an American. It wasn't African American or Asian American or Hungarian American. It was like American. And we should live our lives, honestly, we should live our lives in that kind of a unity of faith, knowing that it really could be tomorrow that the world changes and shifts.
Of course,
and suddenly we are at the end of a sword.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not saying, I hope it just gets really hard. But we know what the Bible says.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that persecution, it's the reason why you hear about incredible things happening in the church in China or in Iran and things like that. They are under such immense pressure. Those people pull together because this could be their last church service. Or last,
Right. And if we really, if you think about it, knowing what the Bible says is coming, for us to begin to practice this kingdom mindset unity now would would help us to be prepared for a time, because we'll know who's on our side. We'll know who we're standing with. We'll know who will stand side by side with us when the time comes, because we're actually acting and living it out now. It says, if you can't walk with the walkman, how are you going to run with the horseman? If we can't do it now while it's easy, how are we going to do it when it makes it more difficult?
Yeah, but I think that it's like, it's hard, but you have to have those pillars. Nothing can be like I was telling David in the office yesterday. I said, being Jewish, I'm not Jewish, but I was just saying it. That's the one thing the Messianic movement has that's very different from the church, is that the church, it's all about Yeshua, and it's all about Jesus. With Messianic Judaism, it's all about Yeshua, but there's also this very important, it's also about being Jewish. And both can be true at the same time. Being Jewish can and should be important because Israel is important to the world's salvation. But it cannot be anywhere near close to the importance of the gospel. And I think that that's where Messianic Judaism has struggles. It has struggles in how important is being Jewish? How important can we make it? And as if it starts to gain on the gospel, you're having that's the problem.
Yeah.
You're in danger.
Well, and it reflects with how money is spent, for example. And this is something that I have qualms with, is we spend a lot of money going to Israel, like every year sometimes.
Right.
How many of those same people have, and this is why I refuse to go to Israel until I can both afford a trip to Israel and a trip to take one of the, because they do Mediterranean tours for Paul's journeys.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
wow. Okay. That's interesting.
The man who wrote 3/4 of the Brit Chadashah, like, you can go on those tours. You can go and visit those same cities and places where he brought the gospel to the synagogues and Jewish communities there where it was first preached. And, but see, and that to me, that just reveals where the focus is sometimes. Is it's not, there is this struggle we want to reveal the Jewishness of the Brit Chadashah, the Jewishness of Yeshua.
Of course,
and
that's important.
And in doing so, some of those things feel like they have been slighted or ignored. And again, I know it's expensive. It's expensive to travel over to halfway across the world and to then, do a whiplash journey through the Holy Land, seeing all the sites, food and, souvenirs, and then to, run over to the coast and get on a boat that's going to take you around the Mediterranean. But it's important, and I know a lot of people who, especially before COVID, would go every year to Israel.
Yeah.
But okay, if you didn't go to Israel for 2 of those years and save that money, then maybe you could also go to all of those other places to really expand your horizon, what you understand as the horizon. Being no, the message, who we are, our movement, goes beyond the borders of the Holy Land.
Right.
It goes to Patmos. It goes to Thessaloniki. It goes to Italy.
Yeah, and we have to remember, and I think you make a really great point, Rabbi Jonathan, is that we as believers live in the diaspora.
Right.
You and I and those of us in this room and most of the people who are listening to this podcast live in the diaspora. We're not living in Israel. And much of what we need to know as believers living in the diaspora is what's written in those books that Paul wrote to the nations outside of Israel, so that we would know how to live outside it. It's kind of like the book of Daniel is written about Daniel living in Babylon so that we would have an example. Here's a righteous man who lived in Babylon, who couldn't go to the temple, who couldn't do the things he wanted to do that way, but still got up every day and prayed.
And he denied all the excesses that were available to him in Babylon. And I just want to throw in, not to interrupt you, I just want to throw in, I think it's also a cultural thing here in America. We are very blessed, and we don't have to worry about things like persecution or we have the freedom. And then there's just that gritty individualism that comes with, America and this, that, and the other. But Daniel denied the excesses of Babylon.
Right. And kept kosher and prayed 3 times a day. He did everything he could in Babylon because his heart's desire was to do everything that was required. Right. In other words, he did everything that was possible to do. And when we read these books that were written to the believers in the lands outside of Israel, we see books that are written. Now we say, those are written to Gentile nations, but they were written to the congregations of believers in those Gentile nations, and that's us.
Right.
That's Jews and non-Jews living in the diaspora. And so when we talk about, let's go to Israel and see what was there, that's wonderful. And I've been to Israel almost 30 times.
Right.
But I think it's just as important for us, especially diaspora congregations, Jews and non-Jews in the diaspora, to understand and see the perspective of those that were living in the diaspora in those early years and who it was Paul was writing and what was happening and where they were living and what they were enduring, because that's our life. That's who we are.
Yeah, I think that when Yeshua overturned the tables in the temple, that's a very incredible moment, because usually he's very gentle and he's very, and he has these moments where he just, he just lights everything up, and it's really interesting. It's what he says though before he starts to really tear into everybody. He says, "My Father's house is supposed to be a house of prayer for all peoples." See, he could have said anything. And Yeshua could have said anything, but what he said was really like a statement of unity was what he was saying. He says, this is supposed to be a place that every single human being can come to, and you've made it into a den of thieves, and he starts to, I just find that very significant, that what angered Yeshua was that they were not, that people of the nations were not there. And that it was supposed to be a place that God is for everyone, is ultimately what he was saying,
And I think that's a great statement to close the episode with, is when Yeshua was casting people out the temple, as Rabbi Toby just said, his statement was, my house was supposed to be a house for all peoples. And I think that the Messianic movement as a whole needs to recognize that if we're actually going to walk in the footsteps of Messiah, if we're actually going to do that, then our congregations need to be a house for worship for all peoples, and our movement needs to work in unity. The all there is the operative word, that we need to work together for the kingdom, Jew and non-Jew, in Messiah, serving and strengthening, encouraging, lifting up each other, because our congregations are supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, is we're talking unity organizationally and such within the Messianic Jewish Movement, but it isn't just that. It's 100%. It's got to be Jew and Gentile. It's got to be Messianic Judaism and the church. We often put up blockers between us and the church. We're all still a part of the same body. I was talking with a mutual friend via message earlier. I was reading this morning Ezekiel 47. The last 3 verses is the proclamation of the reestablishment of the territorial inheritance for the tribes of Israel. And it's clear in the passage dealing with the Olam Haba. Maybe one day we'll dive into the last couple of chapters of Ezekiel as an episode too. But it's clear that it's dealing with the Olam Haba, with the world to come, and so on and so forth, and all that. But those last couple of verses, the last 3 verses or so of Ezekiel 47, specifically talk about not only the reestablishing the tribal inheritance of the land, but it goes on to say that those of the nations, those foreigners that are living amongst you, that are participating with you in life, that they too will gain an inheritance in the territories with the tribe in whom they live. It doesn't say they become Jews or Israel or whatever, but they become a part of the inheritance of the land. And I pitched this to our mutual friend and said, this is one of those things. If this is what the Olam Haba is going to look like, and we're supposed to be a precursor for the Olam Haba and the body of Messiah today, why is Messianic Judaism so typically, not always, this is a whitewash statement, this is not all of Messianic Judaism is like this. If you listen to this show enough, we're not necessarily like this, but so much of Messianic Judaism is so averse to Gentile participation, Gentile involvement, and so on and so forth. If it's clear in Ezekiel 47 that the Olam Haba includes those of the nations who come alongside Israel and gaining inheritance with the tribes of Israel, why don't we represent that in Messianic Judaism today in a cohesive way? And the fact of the matter is that is a major part of this idea of unity as well. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
No,
had nothing at all when I read it this morning to do with what we're talking. As a matter of fact, we didn't even know we were going to talk about this till we got together this morning.
No, and I think the big point we said at the end of the episode. I mean, you just said it. You said that it's what I said to a gentleman at the conference last month. I said or in December, excuse me. And time is going so fast. But I said we were talking about Jews and non-Jews. I said until the Messianic movement properly reckons with this as a whole, as a unified whole, I said, it's going to be continue to be a slog in the movement as far as moving. So,
yeah, the movement needs some X-Lax. Just saying.
Well, thank you all for joining us this morning on this episode. We hope that it was beneficial for y'all to listen to and edifying, and we'll hopefully encourage you to not only push yourselves, but your mentors, your leaders, your rabbis, to all pray for and to seek unity with everyone who proclaims the message of Yeshua and the unity of the kingdom of God.
Thank you for listening to the Messianics podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. And be sure to follow and interact with us on social media at Messianics Podcast.